Hey, it's Irreverent Ages here, and welcome to another installment of the two-man Vet Dungeon tanking series, where my heterosexual life partner Kyle and I two-man every single vet dungeon so that I can show you all the tanking mechanics you're expected to know, and all the extra things you might be responsible for if you stupidly queue up for a random vet dungeon solo style. With only 2 people in our group, we are simulating a bad pug experience so that you can better learn all the mechanics that good groups just burn right past. What you're seeing here is the first optional boss in Earthen Root Enclave, Scalded Roots. His mechanics are very simple. Don't stand in the fire AoEs, taunt the fire wolves, and when he's about to hit you with this conal attack, make sure you do not swing that into the group, as you'll probably kill one of your team members. On the other hand, if one of them deserves it, feel free to swing it at him. The first real boss is this Corruption of Stone, and there are a ton of mechanics to go through on this fight that you need to be aware of as a tank, but luckily, there's only 2 of us, so we have plenty of time to talk about all of them. The very first thing you saw him do was his heavy attack, and this is not a normal heavy attack. What it does is it reduces your damage done, which is just a travesty, because you're a tank and you do so much damage, and it makes it so you take more damage. But most importantly, it puts a heal check on you. Now, unlike most heal checks, you can heal yourself out of this one, but I don't recommend necessarily relying on that, because you'll run out of resources really fast if you try to do that every time. If you don't block the heavy attack, and you roll dodge it instead, then what happens is, he gets enraged, and does barely any extra damage. What you're seeing right now is the hide phase, and that happens at 80%, 60%, and 30%. And pretty much when that happens, you just run and hide behind a stone pillar, because the entire map explodes, and that's the only thing that protects you from an instant death. Now, that happens 2 times at each of those phases, so after the first one goes away, I recommend just running straight forward, because sometimes the next pillar is behind the boss and hard to see, and when that happens, you might not get there in time. So just start running forward, and then veer left or right if it happens to pop up on the left or the right side. Right after every hide phase, you get the stone atro phase, and this is the hardest part, especially when you two-man this. 3 stone atros in non-hard mode are going to pop up, and they will put a beam on somebody at random, and that beam is going to be a pretty hefty snare. And then, if it's not interrupted, then that snare will turn into a stun that needs to be broken free of. So, as the tank, you need to be aware of this, so that way, if you don't have somebody in your group like a healer who's assigned to interrupts, you can get those interrupts. So I slot Crushing Shock if I'm not in a group that knows what they're doing. The next attack you're about to see is this Ground Stomp, and it's pretty much a kite mechanic. You should call this out to your team when it's going to happen, because you'll need to kite the AoEs that grow underneath you after every time he stomps, and everyone in your group will need to do the same. It hits pretty hard, so you don't want to stand in it, and neither does anyone in your group. Now we're going into the second hide phase. You can see we hide behind this pillar, and I'm going to start running forward immediately. Then it shows up on the left, so then I just veer left. Afterwards, again, we're going to get the atro phase. So since we're two-manning this and we don't have a healer, I'm actually going to taunt all of the atros as well as get those interrupts that I talked about earlier. That'll prevent the other guy in my group from taking all the hits from them, so he won't need any healing. In a normal 4-man situation, I would have some form of a ranged breach on my bar, either the Necro one since I'm a Necro tank, or just Ellie Drain. But since this is a 2-man situation, I'm not applying breach, so it's taking a little extra long for those guys to die. What I don't want to do is run over to them and poke them to apply breach, because then we'll be pulling all of those AoEs from the boss directly on my DPS, which probably will get him killed. The only other attack outside of his light attacks that I haven't mentioned yet is his overhead ground slam AoE. It's a big growing AoE. It doesn't hurt that much as the tank. You can literally just stand inside of it and block and not take much damage. But when he does it, which you'll see right here, it does send out AoEs to other people in the group. If he's enraged, on non-hard mode, it's not that big of a deal. But on hard mode, if he's enraged, then it can do a lot of damage to your DPS and your healer. Now, what you normally do at 30% after the second hide phase is go for a straight up execute on the boss. We don't have a healer in our group, so going for the straight up execute would be very difficult because the damage stacks up with all those atros and with the giant AoE that takes up the entire map from the boss. So we opted for killing all of the atros in this case because of our group comp being only 2 people. The biggest issue that I had when 2-manning this fight was sustain, as I need to roll dodge a lot, and a lot of things are hitting me, especially during this atro phase. It gets even worse when Kyle dies. Normally I'd fast forward through this part, but I want to show you some expert level tanking right here, because oh my god, this was the worst, and also I want Kyle to have to think about what he did to me while he watches this video. Now we're moving on to the second optional boss, Lutea, and Lutea is as disappointing as having to eat Thanksgiving dinner alone. Lutea doesn't do a whole lot. This mechanic right here, where she puts a bubble over your head, is really the only thing that your DPS even need to worry about. If they get it, they just block. You can probably just get away with not blocking it, but you might as well block it anyway, because you're not going to run out of resources. Lutea does this thing where she goes into the ground and teleports, and then she puts this lightning swirl around her. You're going to be tanking next to her anyway, so this lightning swirl will pretty much do nothing, and any of your DPS can just stand there with you, and she'll pretty much just die. So, again, there's nothing to this fight. That's pretty much all the mechanics. The second real boss here is Corruption of Root. This boss has far less going on than the first boss. You'll see that 3 AoEs, these roots going across the ground, always target me. They come from the trees. Next up, we have a fawn that spawns. If you don't interrupt the fawn like I just did, it gives you more time to kill it before it jumps into a tree like it's doing right here. When the tree comes out, it becomes a possessed evil tree and shoots out AoEs that aren't that bad to deal with, honestly. On hard mode, yes. Not hard mode, whatever. But it's better to just avoid the tree mechanic by killing the fawn as soon as it spawns and not getting that interrupt. As soon as you kill the tree, the fawn gets ejected out of it, and it can be killed. Now we have these graft root sench ads that I've taunted. When they die, they're going to place giant AoEs on the ground that stay out for the entire fight. So if you want to be really cool, you can pull them off the map somewhere so that way they're not taking up the whole arena. Or if you're like me, you want to give your DPS something to walk around, because why not? Around 70%, the boss is going to split into 3 distributaries that pretty much do similar attacks to the main boss, so in other words, not very much at all. And they can just be DPS down. If you want, you can put on a ranged breach, or you can just run up to it and poke them, whatever you want to do. Since I have absolutely nothing else to talk about for most of the rest of this fight, I might as well mention what the different orbs do, and that is what you unlocked when you did the optional bosses. The red orb puts a beam on you and allows you to basically do extra damage, like you're a Necro. Now, I'm already a Necro, so guess what? I can have more beams. The blue one puts this giant bubble around you, like you see here, and that decreases the damage that you take. It's actually really helpful, especially if you don't have a healer in the group. The rest of this fight is exactly the same. The boss will split again into distributaries at 40%, and then as soon as those are killed, you can just execute the boss from around 40 to 0%. The third optional boss is doro the Indrik. And like an Indrik, he's very annoying and makes very weird sounds. He shoots laser beams from his horn. He sends out green spectral Indriks through you. He teleports across the map to the opposite side. He does this attack that needs to be interrupted when he does it. So pretty much everything every other normal Indrik does, he does, but everything's green instead. The only additional mechanic that most Indriks don't do is this beam you're seeing right here. People just need to kite the beam so they don't die. Other than that, you just stand there, and then the DPS do their job, and the boss dies very quickly. Our final boss is archdruid daviric, and your most important job in this fight as the tank is to lead a philosophical discussion as to whether archdruid daviric is a warden or a sork. One thing is for certain, however, he is super weak in human form. He barely does anything, and you can just take all of his hits while blocking and not worry about a single thing. What you do need to worry about is staying away from those pillars, because that giant growing AoE does hurt quite a bit, especially if you're in the overlap of two of them. As the tank, you can block through one, but you probably don't want to take two. And if you can just avoid them entirely, don't get hit by one at all. The boss will put up a lightning pillar. This should be DPS down by the DPS. And again, if you can, either pull him into the cleave or hit it with a ranged breach. There are fire wolves that spawn, and they explode. I don't know what's up with exploding wolves in this game. Sounds like animal abuse to me. But the exploding wolves pretty much won't target you unless the rest of your group is dead. Now, I took some time because he's so weak to show what the green orb does. And the green orb gives you stamina and magicka recovery increased by 100%, 10% extra movement speed, and if you roll dodge while you have the green orb activated, it heals your group and damages the boss. Not bad. Once again, since we have plenty of time, I do want to point out some extra things. First is, because you clearly don't need to do any tanking on this weakling, you can call out when to block for your DPS when the fire wolves are up. You just say block, and then hopefully they block, and then they won't die. The other thing that I wanted to mention, when those pillars come up, and they have their giant AoEs that explode, right after they explode, they do send out shrapnel, like right here. I know, you're a tank, you don't care, you're blocking anyway. But your DPS and healer, they should block, because then they won't get hit with the shrapnel for like 1,000,000 damage and die. Right under 70%, things get barely more interesting, as the boss turns into a bear. And you'd think as a bear that he'd be a lot stronger than he is, but he's not. He's still pretty weak. Now he does have a strong attack, and that is his lightning breath, and he'll rear up on his legs, and then he'll land and put this giant conal attack on you, which you should definitely swing into your entire group to teach them the lesson that you are in charge of the group. Don't cross me, I'm the tank, and I'm in control of your destiny. Another attack the bear does is this giant AoE, so pretty much just don't bring him into the group, and it won't hit them, and it barely hurts you. What you just saw there was a telegraphed charge attack. The point of that is it breaks the stone pillars on the outside of the room so that they cannot explode and send out shrapnel anywhere. You will not get this put on you unless you're the only one alive, in which case you just run near a pillar or line him up with a couple pillars, and he'll run through them and he'll actually stun himself because he's stupidly hitting his head on a bunch of pillars. Since Kyle is dead, you're about to see that on me, so I run over here and bam, I get hit, he gets hit, we all have a great time. At 45%, the archdruid will turn back into a man, except he'll be a little bit stronger, and I'll point that out when we get there, so let's speed up until that happens. So here comes his new attack. He puts out lightning AoEs that go in circles, and they do quite a bit of damage to your DPS, but you, again, as the tank, you pretty much just stand there and it does nothing to you. That's it. That's his new ability. At 20%, when he turns back into a bear a second time, he will have a new ability that actually is a big deal. Also, during his second transformation, he will go from 20% health to 40% health. You'll see it shortly. When he rears up on his back legs for his regular heavy attack, he puts lightning splashes all over the place on everyone, and they stack up and do a lot of damage. So your DPS are going to need to get healed through this or block through it. Disappointingly, that is the only new mechanic in this second bear form. Other than that, pretty much the only thing that you need to worry about is this lightning breath. But that's not that bad. If you have a healer in your group, you don't even need to heal yourself. Just block through it. As far as the strategy goes, if you have good enough DPS, you can ignore all of the lightning pillars that pop up during this phase and just go for a straight burn from that 40% to 0%. So I'm going to speed through the rest of this because nothing new is going to happen. Congratulations, you have defeated the archdruid. Stay tuned for hard mode where he also transforms into a pig. Man-bear pig. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.